At 58 years old, I believed I was simply preparing a beautiful surprise for my daughter's birthday. I walked into her house with balloons, decorations, and the cake she loved since childhood. The morning felt peaceful, warm, perfect. But that peace shattered the moment I heard it. Soft laughter, splashing water, and two voices whispering behind a closed door. My steps slowed. My heartbeat grew louder. A cold suspicion crept into my chest as I followed the sounds down the hallway. When I reached the bathroom, the door was slightly open, just enough for the truth to stab straight through me. Inside the bathtub, my son-in-law, Adrian, tangled with my daughter's best friend, Kendra. For a moment, my world went silent. Then something inside me hardened. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply reached for the doorknob and locked them inside, quietly, deliberately. Then I took out my phone. 2 calls, one to my daughter, one to Kendra's husband. They had no idea what they were walking into, and neither did the pair trapped in that bathroom.
My name is Eleanor Haynes. I'm 58 years old, and today I truly believed I was creating the perfect surprise for my daughter's birthday. I had spent 2 days baking her favorite vanilla cake, rehearsing how I'd shout, "Happy early birthday," when she walked in. When I unlocked her house and stepped inside, everything felt calm, too calm. The sun filtered softly through the curtains, the scent of fresh flowers lingered from her garden, and for a moment I simply breathed, grateful she had built such a beautiful life with her husband, Adrian. But just as I set the cake on the counter, a strange sound echoed faintly through the hallway. At first I thought it was the plumbing, but then came laughter, soft, intimate, wrong. A tightness gripped my chest as I slowly walked toward the noise, each step peeling away another layer of innocence I didn't know I was about to lose. Eleanor paused in the hallway, frowning as the faint splash of water drifted toward her. She tried convincing herself it was harmless. Maybe Adrian was cleaning something. Maybe someone left a faucet running. But the sound of a woman's voice quickly destroyed that hope. She tightened her grip on the plastic bag of decorations, her hands trembling as dread crept into her bones. The house wasn't supposed to have anyone except Adrian getting ready for work. Lila was still at her job across town, and no one else had keys. Slowly, Eleanor placed the bag on a side table, the balloons rustling softly as if reacting to her fear. She strained her ears again. A giggle, then a whisper. Her stomach twisted. Something wasn't right, and the peaceful morning she expected was dissolving into something cold, unsettling, and terrifyingly real. Her heart hammered as she took another step, the sounds growing clearer, more intimate, impossible to misinterpret. Eleanor's mind raced. Who could possibly be in her daughter's house so comfortably? Her first instinct was to call Lila, but she hesitated. What if she was wrong? What if her mind was exaggerating? She steadied herself against the wall, closing her eyes for a moment, trying to breathe through the fear rising in her throat. But then, another splash, followed by a man's low laugh. Adrian. She would recognize his voice anywhere. Her breath caught sharply. Slowly, she reached the end of the hallway, where the bathroom door stood slightly ajar. The faint steam drifting through the gap felt like a mocking signal. Every part of her wanted to turn back, but she knew she had to see the truth with her own eyes. Eleanor pressed the door with the gentlest touch, the gap widening just enough for her to look inside. What she saw made her chest cave inward. Adrian lounged in the bathtub, water swirling around him, and beside him, leaning against his shoulder with a wicked smile, was Kendra, Lila's best friend since childhood. My mouth dried. The decorations I'd brought now felt cruelly ironic, like props for a celebration that no longer existed. Kendra's laughter echoed off the tiles as she splashed Adrian playfully, completely unaware they were being watched. I felt rooted to the spot, my pulse thundering in my ears. The betrayal wasn't hers, yet it struck me with a force that nearly knocked me back. I swallowed hard. Tears threatened, but something colder rose inside me. Clarity, calm, purpose. I hadn't come here to witness this, but now that I had, I wouldn't walk away quietly. Moving with a stillness that surprised even herself, Eleanor stepped back from the doorway and wiped the moisture forming under her eyes. Not tears, she told herself, just shock. Her hands trembled, but her mind was sharpening, calculating. She quietly scanned the hallway, making sure she hadn't been heard. The laughter continued inside, blissfully ignorant. Eleanor noticed the small lock on the outside of the bathroom door, one Adrian had installed months earlier when the doorknob jammed. She had thought nothing of it then, but now it felt like fate placed a weapon in her hand. She slowly reached toward the knob, her fingers hovering over the cool metal. For a moment she paused, asking herself whether she wanted to confront them right now, face first, rage unleashed. But no, confronting them would give them control. Locking them in would give her time and power. With a silent twist, she made her decision. The soft click of the lock sliding into place felt like thunder in Eleanor's chest. She stepped back immediately, half expecting the door to fly open, but the splashes and whispers continued, completely unaware of their sudden captivity. Eleanor's expression hardened. Not anger, not grief, but something deeper. A mother's instinct combining with moral fury. She turned and walked to the living room, every step deliberate. She needed space to think, to breathe, to plan. There were two people who deserved to know the truth more than anyone. Her daughter, who trusted her husband blindly, and Marcus, Kendra's devoted husband. Sitting on the edge of the couch, Eleanor stared at her phone, her thumb trembling above the screen. She inhaled slowly. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. And justice required timing. Eleanor finally exhaled, steadying herself as she tapped her daughter's name. When Lila answered, Eleanor forced her voice to sound strained but not panicked. "Sweetheart, I need you to come home, now." She didn't explain. She couldn't, not yet. Lila agreed instantly, worrying tightening her voice. The moment the call ended, Eleanor selected the next contact, Marcus Reynolds. She had met him many times, kind, loyal, hardworking, the type of man who adored his wife without question. When he picked up, Eleanor spoke calmly. "Marcus, you need to come to Lila's house immediately. It's important." She didn't give him time to ask anything. She didn't owe explanations until they arrived. As she set her phone down, a cold, focused silence filled the house. The cheaters had no idea that their private fantasy was moments away from collapsing, and Eleanor was ready to watch it fall. Eleanor stood in the living room, staring at the locked bathroom door from a distance, feeling her heartbeat slow into something steady, purposeful. The shock had burned away, leaving behind a cold clarity she didn't know she possessed. Her fingers still trembled from what she had witnessed, but her mind was sharper than it had been in years. She took a deep breath, forcing her thoughts into order. She knew she only had a short window before Adrian and Kendra realized they were trapped. For now they were laughing, splashing, intoxicated by their own betrayal. But the moment they tried to leave, panic would set in. And when panic hit, Eleanor wanted the right people standing in that hallway. It was time to set the plan in motion, quietly, strategically, without a shred of mercy. Eleanor picked up her phone and dialed Lila, with hands that felt both heavy and weightless. When her daughter answered, cheerful and unsuspecting, Eleanor nearly broke down, but she forced her voice into a soft tremble. "Sweetheart, can you come home? I need you." She didn't give details on purpose. Lila's imagination would do the rest. She made sure her tone carried just enough urgency to pull her daughter away from work instantly, but not enough to send her into panic. As soon as the call ended, Eleanor placed the phone on her lap, staring at the screen. This wasn't how she imagined Lila's birthday surprise would begin, but some truths needed to be revealed in the harshest possible light. She whispered to herself, "You deserve to know." And the next piece of the puzzle waited on her contact list. Miles away, Lila dropped everything the moment her mother's strained voice echoed through the phone. She didn't question it. Eleanor never asked her to leave work unless it was serious. She grabbed her bag, told her supervisor there was a family issue,
and hurried through the parking lot with rising worry. Meanwhile, Eleanor stood by the window, watching the empty driveway, imagining her daughter speeding home in confusion. The guilt twisted inside her. Lila had no idea what she was about to walk into. But shielding her wouldn't erase the betrayal. It would only prolong the pain. Eleanor reminded herself that truth, no matter how destructive, was always better than living with lies. She stepped away from the window, her resolve strengthening. Lila deserved honesty, brutal, undeniable honesty. And when she arrived, she would see everything.
Her own eyes. Eleanor selected Marcus's name, her finger hesitating for just a moment. Calling him felt heavier, more dangerous because the truth wouldn't just hurt him, it would crush him. But he deserved the truth just as much as her daughter did. When he answered, his voice was calm, unaware of the knife she was about to twist into his world. "Marcus," she began, steadying her breath, "I need you to come to Lila's house immediately. It's important." He asked what was wrong, but Eleanor didn't explain. She simply repeated, "Come now." The silence on his end told her he sensed something serious. After the call ended, Eleanor set the phone down slowly. 2 victims were on their way. 2 cheaters remained trapped. And Eleanor stood at the center, orchestrating the moment the truth would finally detonate. Eleanor walked into the living room with purpose, knowing this space would soon become the stage where 2 marriages collapsed. She began clearing the center area, moving the coffee table aside, pulling back the curtains to let daylight spill across the room, ensuring nothing blocked the view toward the hallway. The decorations she had brought earlier now looked painfully cheerful, mocking the situation. She gathered them into a corner, her hands steady, almost mechanical. She wanted everything simple, open, and undeniable. No distractions, no escape. When the moment came, Lila and Marcus needed to see the truth without question. Eleanor stood in the middle of the room, imagining the confrontation unfolding. She wasn't doing this to cause chaos. She was doing it to reveal the reality both of them deserved to know. And the house, once a place of love, now waited as the perfect arena for truth. From the hallway, Eleanor heard the first signs of confusion. A soft rattle of the doorknob, a faint, irritated, "What the hell?" from Adrian. Then another attempt to push the door open. The laughter had stopped. Silence, thick and uneasy, filled the air as they realized something was wrong. Eleanor leaned slightly, listening, without moving closer. She heard Kendra whisper urgently, followed by another rattle, harder this time. The panic was beginning. Good. Eleanor wanted them anxious, questioning, trapped in their own filth before the real storm arrived. She crossed her arms and closed her eyes, letting the sounds fuel her resolve. They had created this mess. She was simply containing it. And soon, the people who deserved justice would arrive and witness the truth in its rawest form. Eleanor stood near the window when she heard the first car pull into the driveway. Lila. She recognized the familiar sound of her daughter's engine, fast, tense, worried. A wave of emotion washed through her, but she held herself together. Moments later, another car approached and parked right behind Lila's. Marcus. Perfect timing. Eleanor watched both doors swing open almost simultaneously, their footsteps quick and anxious as they approached the house. She inhaled deeply, preparing herself for what came next. Behind the bathroom door, the cheaters were still struggling, unaware of who was now outside. Eleanor smoothed her shirt, straightened her posture, and stepped into the hallway, ready to guide 2 betrayed spouses toward the moment that would change everything. The truth was seconds away from erupting, and she would be the one to open the floodgate. Lila burst through the front door with panic written across her face, calling out for her mother before she even stepped fully inside. She rushed toward Eleanor, eyes wide, breath uneven, searching for any sign of what might be wrong. Eleanor placed a steadying hand on her daughter's arm, offering no explanation, only a calm but heavy, "Just follow me." Lila's heartbeat thundered as she glanced around the house, noticing the half-set decorations shoved into a corner. Something was clearly off, deeply off. Her instincts screamed danger, but Eleanor's controlled silence made it worse. As she walked down the hallway beside her mother, every step tightened the knot in her stomach. She didn't know what waited behind that door, but she sensed her world was about to change forever. Just as Eleanor guided Lila toward the hallway, the front door swung open again, this time with the heavy force of a man on the edge of breaking. Marcus entered, eyes blazing, breath sharp, confusion turning into dread the moment he saw Eleanor's expression. "What's going on?" he demanded, his voice tight with restrained anger. Eleanor didn't answer. She simply motioned for him to follow. Marcus obeyed, jaw clenched, sensing the gravity of what was about to unfold. His steps echoed behind Leela's, the tension in the house thick enough to choke on. He wasn't just worried, he was terrified of the truth he suspected but never dared imagine. As he reached the hallway, he noticed the faint sound of muffled voices behind the bathroom door, and suddenly, everything inside him snapped into focus. Eleanor led Leela and Marcus down the hallway with a calmness that felt almost unnatural. Leela gripped her mother's arm, whispering, "Mom, please just tell me what's happening." But Eleanor only shook her head gently and continued forward. Marcus followed closely, his eyes locked on the bathroom door that rattled slightly from the inside. The air grew heavier with every step they took, the truth vibrating through the walls like a warning. Eleanor stopped just a few feet from the door, turning to look at both of them, her expression carved from equal parts sorrow and steel. Her silence said more than any words could. Leela's breath hitched. Marcus's fist tightened. They were standing at the threshold of a moment that would break two marriages at once. Behind the bathroom door, Adrian and Kendra's panic reached full volume. They hammered on the door, voices shaking, Adrian barking, "Why is this locked?" while Kendra whispered urgently, trying to stay calm. The once playful splashes had turned into frantic thuds as they realized the door wouldn't budge. Leela's eyes widened at the sound of Adrian's voice, confused, angry, trapped. Marcus froze, instantly recognizing Kendra's panicked whisper. The color drained from both their faces. Eleanor didn't move. She let the sounds fill the hallway, let the truth reveal itself before she even opened her mouth. Leela took a step back, disbelief forming on her lips. Marcus's face went cold with fury. Inside the bathroom, the pounding grew louder, more desperate. Their excuses had already begun before they even knew who waited on the other side. Without saying a single word, Eleanor stepped forward, her hand steady as she reached for the lock. She didn't look at Leela. She didn't look at Marcus. She simply clicked the lock open with a soft, deliberate motion. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the tense hallway. Adrian immediately tried to push the door open, but Eleanor stepped aside calmly, giving him full access to the scene he was about to walk into. She didn't need to speak. Her silence was the verdict. As she moved out of the way, her expression remained unreadable, a mother who had seen enough to let justice unfold without interference. Leela and Marcus stood still, eyes wide, emotions twisted between dread and rage. The moment had come. The truth had no place left to hide. The door flew open, and Adrian stumbled out first, dripping wet, wrapped in nothing but a towel, and stopping dead when he saw Leela standing there, trembling. His face was drained of color. Behind him, Kendra clutched her towel tightly, her expression a mixture of shock and guilt when she saw Marcus glaring at her with pure disbelief. The hallway seemed to freeze in time as the four of them stared at one another, each second sharpening the magnitude of betrayal. Leela's hand covered her mouth, tears welling instantly as reality crashed into her. Marcus took a step forward, his jaw pulsing, fists shaking as he absorbed the sight. Adrian tried to speak, stuttering pathetic excuses. Kendra looked away, unable to meet anyone's eyes. They stood, exposed, physically and emotionally, caught in the act, with nowhere left to run. The eruption came fast. Marcus lunged forward, his rage breaking loose, as he grabbed the edge of Adrian's towel, ready to tear into him. But Eleanor quickly stepped between them, her arms outstretched to prevent a physical fight. Marcus shook with fury, eyes burning into Kendra as she stammered, "It wasn't what it looks like. Please, just let me explain." But Leela couldn't even speak. Her legs buckled beneath her and she slid to the floor, spilling as if her heart had cracked open. Adrian reached toward her, whispering her name, but she flinched, recoiling from his touch like it was poison. The hallway filled with shouting, sobbing, and the choking silence between broken vows. Adrian's excuses collided with Kendra's lies, while Marcus's voice roared over them all. And Eleanor watched the chaos, knowing this was only the beginning of the reckoning.
Adrian sat across from Leela, his voice trembling as he blamed everything on stress. His job, his workload, his loneliness. Anything that made him look like the wounded party. He painted himself as a man who simply broke under pressure, not someone who chose betrayal. But Leela watched him with a cold, steady expression, her fingers tightening around her coffee mug as she replayed the image of him in that bathtub with her best friend. Each word he spoke sounded rehearsed, like a script meant to earn sympathy rather than forgiveness. And as he kept rambling, she realized something crucial. Adrian wasn't sorry. He was terrified of losing control. That was the moment she decided she would no longer be manipulated. Kendra arrived 2 hours later, acting as though she were the victim, insisting Eleanor must have misunderstood what she saw. She spun a tale about how she and Adrian were just talking, and how the bathtub incident was a silly misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But before she could dig herself deeper, Marcus showed up with cold fury in his eyes and exposed her history, little betrayals, secret flings, and manipulative patterns she had long hidden. Kendra's mask shattered instantly. Leela saw her friend for who she truly was, a woman who wore innocence like perfume, sweet on the surface, poisonous underneath. The room fell silent, as truth finally eclipsed lies. That night, Leela broke down in her mother's arms, finally letting the truth crash over her like a wave she couldn't outrun. Eleanor held her daughter tightly, brushing tears from her cheeks as Leela's voice cracked under the weight of betrayal. They sat on the living room floor, surrounded by half-folded decorations meant for a celebration that never happened. Eleanor whispered gently, reminding her daughter that pain wasn't weakness, but evidence of how deeply she loved. Leela cried harder, mourning not just the marriage she believed in, but the trust she once placed in two people who didn't deserve it. Eleanor stayed with her through every tear, promising she would not face any of this alone. The next morning, Leela packed a small suitcase and returned to her childhood home. It felt strange walking back into the room she once painted with teenage dreams, but right now it was the only place where she felt safe. Adrian called nonstop, sending long texts filled with apologies and explanations, but Leela muted every notification. She needed space to breathe, to think, to exist without being buried under his lies. Eleanor made her tea, tucked her into the guest room, and told her she could stay as long as she needed. For the first time since the betrayal, Leela felt a flicker of control returning to her life. Marcus, meanwhile, wasted no time. He filed separation papers and sent Kendra a message with nothing but the word, enough. The betrayal had cracked something inside him, something that could not be repaired with tears or apologies. He shared the truth with his family, gathered his evidence, and began the long process of reclaiming his life from a woman who had manipulated him for years. Kendra tried to contact him, but he blocked him on every platform. His silence was louder than any confrontation could have been. And as he stood in front of the courthouse, papers in hand, Marcus felt, for the first time in years, free. Adrian made his next move. He appeared outside Eleanor's home with flowers, letters, and promises, crafted to sound heartfelt. He spoke of therapy, change, and second chances, insisting this affair was a moment of weakness and not a reflection of his love for Leela. But when Leela stepped outside, she saw the same desperation, the same excuses, the same rehearsed sorrow she'd seen before. Adrian wasn't trying to fix their marriage. He was trying to fix his image. And when she asked him a simple question, why her? He froze. He had no answer. That silence told Leela everything she needed to know. While sorting through the drawer Adrian thought she never checked, Leela found messages, old ones archived and tucked away, conversations with women she didn't know, spanning months before the bathtub betrayal. Photos, flirtations, plans. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern, a lifestyle, a truth Adrian had buried under lies. Her chest tightened as she scrolled, realizing she had been living with the stranger wearing her husband's face. But instead of breaking, she felt something harden inside her. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. This was clarity, and clarity was the first step toward justice.
What Lila found was just the beginning.
The real twist is coming. Stay with me and subscribe because betrayal is about to face payback.
Eleanor spent the next morning transforming her home into something entirely different, a place not of sorrow, but of rebirth. She brought in soft lights, flowers, and a cake Leela used to love as a child, deciding her daughter deserved a birthday that marked the start of healing rather than heartbreak. As Leela walked in, confused by the soft glow and familiar scent of vanilla, Eleanor hugged her tightly and whispered that this year wouldn't be about age, but about freedom. Leela felt her chest tighten, not from pain this time, but from the overwhelming warmth of being seen, protected, and celebrated by the one person who had never betrayed her. That birthday wasn't a distraction. It was a declaration that her life was hers again. By afternoon, close family and a few loyal friends arrived, people who genuinely loved Leela and stood by her long before the lies collapsed. They didn't come to gossip or pity. They came to lift her up, pouring strength into her through soft words, warm embraces, and the quiet reassurance that she wasn't alone. Leela listened as they shared memories, reminding her who she was before Adrian's manipulations dimmed her light. Every hug felt like a piece of herself returning, every smile a step away from the chaos she had endured. As laughter slowly filled the room, Leela realized she wasn't rebuilding alone. She had an entire circle ready to hold her steady as she stepped into a new chapter. Later that evening, Adrian arrived uninvited, demanding to explain and begging for another chance. Leela stepped outside to face him, her posture steady, her eyes clearer than ever. He talked fast, promises, tears, excuses, but she didn't feel the same pull she once did. For the first time, she saw him not as her husband, but as the architect of her pain. She told him calmly that love doesn't survive betrayal, and that her healing couldn't begin with him still standing in the doorway of her life. Adrian's face crumbled, but Leela did not. She turned away, not out of cruelty, but out of strength. It was the cleanest goodbye she had ever given. Adrian moved out the next morning, and almost instantly the facade he had worked so hard to maintain began to collapse. More women came forward, old messages resurfaced, questionable nights revealed, and his carefully polished image shattered. His friends distanced themselves, his family expressed disappointment, and he found himself facing consequences he never believed would catch up. Meanwhile, Leela watched from a distance, not with satisfaction, but with closure. She realized she didn't need revenge. Life had a way of balancing its own scales. Adrian's downfall wasn't her victory. It was simply the truth finally stepping into the light. Marcus stopped by a few days later, carrying a quiet sadness similar to Leela's, but softened by understanding. They talked on the porch for hours, sharing the pieces of themselves they had hidden during their marriages, doubts, instincts, and the moments they wished they had listened to their hearts sooner. Their connection wasn't romantic, it was human. Two people who had walked through the same fire and survived. Their conversations became small anchors in the storm, reminders that pain didn't have to isolate them. Marcus didn't try to fix her, he simply stood beside her. And for Leela, that was enough. In the morning after the quiet celebration, Eleanor handed Leela a small silver key wrapped in a blue ribbon. Confused, Leela tilted her head until her mother explained it was the key to a new apartment Eleanor had secretly arranged for her to move into whenever she felt ready. Leela stared at the key, emotions swelling as she realized this wasn't just a gift. It was a doorway to independence, stability, and the life she deserved. Eleanor told her she believed in her strength long before she believed in it herself. For the first time since the betrayal, Leela felt excited, not for escape, but for possibility. 2 weeks later, Leela stood in the doorway of her new apartment, sunlight pouring across empty floors that smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. She set down her small suitcase and walked slowly through the rooms, touching the walls as if grounding herself in the moment. This wasn't just a move. It was a rebirth. She wasn't running from her past. She was stepping into her future. As she lit a single candle on the leftover birthday cupcake Eleanor insisted she take, she whispered to herself that this would be the year she built a life filled with honesty, peace, and self-respect. Her birthday, once destroyed, had become the day she reclaimed her entire life.